Alright guys, so today we're going to be doing the rest of the build on this, and hopefully you guys like what you see here. I'm pretty stoked. I don't like to show it at the beginning, I'm showing it at the beginning. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Alright, so this video is picking up where part 1 left off. This is part 2 of the Upper Armor Batman build. And if you haven't done part 1, you're going to need to go back and do that so you can see how to make the upper part of the armor as well as the lower part here. So one of the first things I'm going to work on is a bat symbol that is going to go on the chest here, and you can do whatever design you want. I picked this one and modified it somewhat so it's kind of like the Batman v Superman Batfleck meets Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. Kind of a blending of the two. I'm going to go ahead and trace this onto some 5mm EVA foam because I want this to stand out. And I'm pretty much going to cut all of the angles straight on with the X-Acto knife, except for these outside edges of the wings. I am going to cut at a bias. Alright, I've cut out my bat symbol pattern, and you can see I've already started to heat it and put a little bit of shape into it. I want to get the shape into it before I seal it and texture it. And the reason for that is it's going to have to fit to this surface here that has some rather different and aggressive curves to it. So yeah, I've started to heat it and shape it so I can match up and glue up against that tightly. Alright, now that I got the shape in it that I want, I'm going to go ahead and start texturing it. And to texture it, I'm using some Plasti. And to get a nice textured look here, I'm not going to put a solid coat on it. Just going to spray it and give it a nice beaded texture. It's not a solid, even coat. Okay, and I'm going to repeat this process several times until I get nice pebbled texture. I've done this in several of my other videos, including the Batman cowl video, if you've seen that one. It's pretty much the same process. Okay, and here I go with coat number 3. So here it started getting a pebbly, leathery texture to it. I'm going to do this for probably a 4th or 5th coat. And while I'm waiting in between coats for the bat symbol to dry, I'm going to start texturing the abdominal plate in the same manner. Giving it that same beaded texture, and both the symbol and this abdominal plate and the back piece, probably going to give about five thin coats to each. I'm going to give them each about a half hour to dry between coats. Alright, I'm at coat 5 on this, and I feel like the texture is pretty good. Same with the abdominal piece as well. I feel like the texture has come out pretty good so far. This isn't quite dry. Next, I'm going to go and texture the back piece. And I took some packing tape and just masked off the Velcro areas because I don't want the plastic getting into that. It won't stick as well. Probably going to give a more solid coat here in the center and just do some texturing out on the side pieces here so that there's some contrast. Back piece, like I just stated, I'm going to start by texturing the side with some beaded coats, just like I did with the other one. With the centerpiece, I'm going to hit pretty solidly. And between doing all these, I'm pretty much running out of Plasti dip already, but luckily I did buy 2 cans. I figured one was just not going to be enough, and it looks like it's not. Okay. My textured area here on the side. Center I've given a nice solid coat to. Okay, so while I'm waiting on the Plasti dip to dry, I'm going to start sanding down all the seams. And there wasn't really anything to sand or cover on the bottom piece, but this upper piece, there's a lot of angles and glued areas, so I'm going to go through some really rough grit sandpaper. This is actually just some excess grip tape I had laying around, but it's super rough grit and really takes stuff off. And I just start sanding all these. You can see I've already started doing these. Sand and heat, and then once I get all of these sanded, I'm going to go back through and start the siliconing process. Alright, I've got all my seams sanded here, and I'm now ready to start siliconing. The type of stuff I use is called Alex Plus. It's from a brand called DAP. It's all-purpose acrylic latex caulk plus silicone, 40-year guarantee. And I usually don't leave it in the tube. I just take it, put it in the gun, and I squeeze it out into a Tupperware. That way I can just dip my finger in it whenever I need it. I have some paper towels here and some water. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some caulk on my finger. I'm going to spread it out over the seam. Make sure I push it down inside the seam. I'm going to go pretty liberal with it. Okay. Now that I've spread it out as evenly as possible with just my finger, I'm gonna go ahead and wipe the excess off my hand here. My finger's clean. I'm gonna dip my finger in the water, and then with my finger wet, I'm just gonna start smoothing this out. And I by no means know who originated this, but I learned it from watching a YouTube video, and that YouTube video was from a channel called Raw Customs. And props to that channel, because years ago, or well, actually about 2 years ago, when I was trying to figure out how to cover these seams up, I was trying different things, and a lot of them just weren't working for one reason or another. And this has always worked pretty good. I haven't found anything else yet to rival it. Not saying that there's not. And I have come across a few things that cost more money or require more specialized equipment. So if I ever have the money to get that, I may. But yeah, and you can see that's pretty smoothed out. And we'll let this dry for at least 8 hours. And then I'm going to sand it. And next I'm going to go ahead and work all the way around here and fill these other seams the way I did this one and smooth them out. And I'm also going to wipe off this stuff that I got over here. Alright. Alright, I've got all my siliconing done here. And also did some up on the shoulder as well. A little bit on these top pieces. Not necessary, but I just did it so it looks a little more smooth. And this part here, I'm just going to do one layer. And it's done. I'm going to sand it. That's it. But for this chest area, I'm probably going to apply at least one more layer of silicone over this. As you can see, all that little line in through there is the foam still sticking through, and I want to cover that up. I can always sand it out and smooth it out later if it's a little bit too thick. I try not to put too much on excessively because it leads to a lot of sanding, and it also takes a lot longer to dry. I usually have to wait about 24 hours before I can actually sand it. But yeah, I'm going to give this a couple hours. Once it's dry to the touch, I'm going to come back and put another layer of silicone on it. But I'm not going to start sanding this till tomorrow. Alright, here it is after the second coat. And you can still see there's just a little bit of the seam sticking through, so I am probably going to put a third layer on it. And one thing to keep in mind with this, and try not to get too frustrated, is just to be patient, because the stuff is water-based, so as it begins to dry, of course, it's part water, it will shrink up, and ultimately this will slow your project down. It really does. And you could leave the seams. I didn't have to do this. I just wanted it to be seamless. That's just my own personal thing. You can leave it there. But yeah, I'm going to go through now and put probably a third coat of the silicone over this. Once that dries, hopefully the third coat will be enough and I can go ahead and start sanding it. Alright, now this has had ample time to dry and set. I'm going to go ahead and start sanding it to get out all these little waves and grains and things that are in it. And what I usually do is I start off with a 150 grit sanding block. Then I move to a 300 grit sanding block. And I finish it off finally with the superfine 600 grit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start this. Alright, now that I've got my silicone all sanded, I've gone through here with just a regular old ballpoint pen. And I drew out the symbol of the bat that's going to go on the chest. So I'm going to contact cement that on. Now, part of the reason why I didn't glue this on first is this stuff doesn't stick real well to the silicone, so I kind of drew out where I wanted the silicone to stop, where the glue's going to hit it. It does okay, but it's not great, and sometimes it will pull the silicone up. So I made sure to sand those areas where it touches a little bit extra here, and up here as well, just so it doesn't get all wonky. And this, of course, I textured. Has that nice pebbled texture, much like my Batman cowl that I made in a previous video. And also much like the abdomen piece here. But for contrast, I'm going to end up sealing all this with Mod Podge. And I'm going to make the brush strokes go a certain way on the chest. This piece here kind of at an angle. And this piece here back. And the reason is so that this pops. This is going to stand out. And part of the reason I took so much time and effort and care siliconing this and getting it as smooth as possible is because the bat symbol, the cowl, the utility belt, certain parts like that of the costume, your eyes are just kind of automatically drawn to it, or at least mine are. And I assume children will be as well. So I really wanted these parts to stand out. So next I'm going to take some contact cement, and I'm going to go ahead and contact cement this to the chest piece. Alright, I got my logo contact cemented on, and pretty happy with how it came out, with the placement. Okay, so next, I'm going to go ahead and do the sealing. And to seal this foam up before I paint it, I'm not going to use Mod Podge like I did with the abdominal piece. Or I'm sorry, I'm not going to use Plasti dip like I did with the abdominal piece. What I'm going to use for this instead is Mod Podge. And the reason why I didn't seal it first, then glue this on, is because much like with a thick area of silicone, sometimes the contact cement will pull up and take the Mod Podge with it. So just to make sure this stays where it is, I'm sealing this after the fact, which will make it a little more tedious and time consuming, but I think in the end the effect will be worth it. Okay, so before I go on to sealing this, one of the first things I did was took my air compressor and just blew all the little particles and things off of it from sanding that I could. Made sure it was as clean as possible. And I even broke out a brand new brush. That's how much I like Batman. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to start at the bottom. And the reason why I'm starting at the bottom, if I start at the top here and go down, I inevitably end up at some point grabbing onto this, and I end up putting a thumbprint or something into it, and I have to fix that, and it's never quite right. And of course, nothing I make is flawless. I'm not that good. But, I do want this to look as good as possible. So I'm going to start with the bottom here and work my way to the top. Okay, so just like I said, I started with the bottom here, and I started working my way up, and I stopped right at these little wings that come off here. And hopefully it'll pick it up. If I move it in the light here, you can see the brush strokes on this top black piece here are going in this direction. And I try to get them as thin and even as possible so it has a nice textured look versus, say, having a splotchy, brushed up looking look. See how those lines are all pretty even there? Same thing with the chest piece and everything else. Whenever I did it, I went from the center outwards on the top and the bottom. And here on the side, you can see it's not quite dry there, so you can still see in the white the brush strokes, and they go straight from the side all the way around. This does take some technical skill if you want to get it straight and even so that it doesn't look sloppy, but like I say, I feel like it's worth the time to have that contrast between the chest piece and the bat symbol so it really pops. And to do the straps, I'm just going to go this way with the brush strokes, straight up back. And same thing on the shoulder pads. I'm just going to work from the top down to the bottom. And that's pretty much it. And once I get all this sealed, the back of it, I'm just going to kind of do whatever. It's going to be even, but it's going to be covered by a cape for the most part. So unless somebody wants me to take the cape off to see the back of the costume, like there, it's not going to be seen. Excuse me. So yeah, my main concern was this here. And the first layer of Mod Podge soaked into the foam pretty good. And whenever it did, it looked pretty plain. So I did put on 2 layers to get the liney graininess that I have. And 2 layers should be sufficient. If you put them on thin, you may need to do 3 or possibly even 4, but that's all up to you and how you want it to look. And like I say, I don't so much look at it straight on, but whenever the light hits it, to see that grainy texture. So however you like that to look is ultimately what you're going to come out with. No matter how much you paint it, unless you put like 6 layers of paint, you're still going to see those lines really, really well. Especially if you use an airbrush, which I will be doing so. Alright, so while I am waiting on the shoulders and chest and back part to dry, I'm going to go ahead and airbrush this piece. This has had 2 whole days for the Plasti dip to completely dry. And I'm going to focus mainly on these areas here in between the plates where the Plasti dip didn't quite get. But I'm really going to paint the whole thing. And to do that, I'm using Tester's Aztec Opaque Black that I have mixed with some 4030 from Wicked Colors by Createx, and it's an Intercoat Mix Additive Balancing Clear. But what it really is, what I love about it, is it has a polyurethane base that's acrylic. And I also added some thinner, and that's basically the paint mix that I'm going to use to airbrush this. So yeah, it's not quite dry yet, but came out looking pretty good. Really like the airbrush because I can really get down into all those cracks and all those crevices. Turn it one nice uniform color. Yeah, I mean, nothing really beats getting that uniform color, covering up all the different colors of EVA foam, the seam work. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked with how this came out. Alright, now that it's had 24 hours to dry, I'm going to go ahead and try it on with the cape and see how it all feels. Alright, so here it is. Of course, I don't have the whole back costume on, just a mask, chest piece, tabs, and cape. But I really like the squared off look of the shoulders, very comic look. And, you know, as you can see, this is not like any of the Ark Batman, it's not Batfleck, it's not Michael Keaton Tim Burton Batman. Anytime I make a costume for myself or my fiance, I just kind of do whatever. And part of the whatever that I'm doing has to do with body shape, height, weight, things like that. So always take those things into consideration whenever you're making anything. You can make an Arkham costume that's down to the piece, put it on you, it may look silly. So always keep in mind your body shape, height, weight, and things like that. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think, but I am overall pretty stoked about this. I can actually move around somewhat in it. You know, that other one was so stiff, being all one piece. I couldn't bend over, I couldn't move, I couldn't go back, I couldn't twist, like literally nothing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gives you guys some new ideas. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, but stay tuned. Well, I know what I'm going to do next. I'm going to make another Batman cowl. I'm not going to film that because I already did it, but I am making another one. And also, once I hit 200 subscribers, I am going to do a giveaway. Probably a Nerf gun or something, but yeah, just keep your eyes peeled. I'll do a separate video talking just about that. Alright, and as always, I hope this video helped you out, gave you some ideas, inspired you, entertained you, and thanks for watching, and have a great day.